Hey, boys and girls. Welcome back to another epic adventure in the world of retro gaming. Today we go back in time to dust off a gem, or rather, a forgotten pebble from the early 90s, Rastan Saga on Game Gear. Yes, you read right, the paperback version of that legendary title that promised epic adventures, mythical enemies, and fights to the death, or, at least, it tried. For those who don't know, Rastan Saga was born as a successful arcade by Taito, where we take on the role of a barbarian, with more muscles than personality, who makes his way through hordes of enemies in a fantasy setting full of traps and obstacles. A sort of Conan the Barbarian on steroids, with a world full of magical creatures, medieval castles, and mountain-splitting swordplay. But then, someone at Taito thought, hey, why not bring it to the Game Gear too? Let's see how a muscular barbarian looks in a tiny 2.6-inch screen.
Let's immediately talk about what catches the eye, the graphics. Guys, what a show! And I don't mean entertainment in a positive sense, no. On Game Gear, our hero Rastan looks more like a little man who accidentally ended up in a blender. Character details? Never mind. Between pixels as big as ice cubes and a color palette that is a compliment to say is limited, everything seems like an indistinct blur. It almost seems like Rastan has a distant second cousin who wanted to cosplay as Conan at a village market. Is it epic? Of course, if by epic, we mean confusing. The wallpapers, well, let's say they try. Yes, we have some hints of castles, forests, and mountains, but they seem more drawn with a sponge dipped in paint than a brush. And let's not talk about the colors, so bright that they seem to have just come from a sheet of carbon paper. But do you know what? Let's at least give credit to the attempt. Fitting all this onto a Game Gear is a feat even if the end result is like watching a barbarian in an old portable television with a bad antenna.
Now let's talk about the controls. Take a deep breath, because this is where the real fun begins. Rastan can jump, attack and, okay, enough, because you already understood. There is nothing more, nothing other than an endless barrage of sword blows, and the beauty is that these sword blows seem more like a caress. Every time Rastan hits an enemy, it almost seems like he's saying, sorry, can I? And then, there's the leap. Ah, the leap. In theory, it should be one of the basic movements of an adventure game, right? But jumping here is like doing somersaults to cross a river of lava in dress shoes. Rastan jumps as if he had a heavy weight attached to his ankles. It is a leap that I would define as not very collaborative. Often, you find yourself missing platforms by a few pixels, because the physics here seem to be inspired by that of an old pinball machine, rather than a fantasy adventure. And every jumping mistake? We pay with our lives, or rather with our time and our patience.
Let's move on to the variety of enemies. Oops, no, sorry, I got the word wrong. To the lack of enemy variety. In this game there are 3 types of enemies: generic monsters with a color variant, and more generic monsters, to never get bored. There are snakes, bats, faceless warriors, and a couple of other beasts that seem like the result of a creative slip. And the difficulty? Guys, if you are a fan of challenges, get ready to review the very concept of difficult. But don't think of a well-balanced difficulty. Oh no. It's that infuriating difficulty where every time Rastan gets hit, it feels like he's being shot out of a cannon. Even though he's fully armed, all it takes is a touch of the flying bat and Rastan leaps backwards as if he'd stepped on a landmine. It's as if the game were saying, dear player, patience is not included in the package.
But let's give credit where it's due, the music. Yes, unbelievable but true, Rastan Saga on Game Gear has a soundtrack that isn't bad at all. Sure, it's a bit metallic and compressed like an old malfunctioning jukebox, but it maintains that epic tone that is a bit reminiscent of 80s fantasy atmospheres. It's the classic dun 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 that makes you feel like you're actually saving the world, even if you're just trying to hit a snake in a square of pixels. Let's say it's the most epic thing in the game, and that's saying something. So, we come to the grand finale, replayability. You'll say, well, at least there will be a variety of levels, and I tell you, no. Rastan Saga on Game Gear is as long as a lunch break, but the frustration it causes feels like that of an entire work shift. Yep, completing the game takes about half an hour, if you're stoic enough to endure the endless cycle of missed jumps, recycled monsters and, of course, the epic soundtrack that sounds like a funeral march. And once it's finished, does it make you want to play it again? Probably not, unless you're a masochist or a collector of dirty games. Because at the end of the day, the real trophy is being able to say that you have completed Rastan Saga on Game Gear. But how many can boast of such success?
So, what do we think? Rastan Saga on Game Gear is one of those experiences that makes us appreciate the joys of modern graphics and responsive controls. Don't get me wrong, the game has its own retro charm and might even make you smile, if you have the sense of humor of someone who can laugh at disasters. For everyone else, I recommend approaching it with caution, or avoid it. And with this, we also close this epic adventure into the meanders of forgotten ports. Remember, not all games age like wine. Some, like Rastan Saga for Game Gear, age more like milk. Sign up for more reviews of joys and sorrows from the past, and let me know in the comments if you've ever played this barbaric and frustrating title. See you next time, and happy retro gaming everyone!